What's good, world? What's good, Facebook? What's good, everybody watching us on listenvisionlive.com? It's the Nitty Gritty Show. It's your boy, Jay DeCosta.
It's your girl, Katniss.
And I'm the one and only Tay Jordan.
And together we are the Nitty Gritty. Yo, we got a great show lined up for y'all today. And of course, if you've seen some of the aesthetics have changed, we got an intro video. We got background.
We official like a ref. What's up?
Yeah, you know, folks do invest back into themselves. We didn't go out there and buy purses and stuff like that, you know. So, yeah, definitely blessed. And we have a special guest with us today.
Definitely.
Today we have LaShonia Thompson. Did I say that right?
Yes.
All right. She is the executive director of The Wire, which stands for Women Involved in Reentry Efforts. It's a network of previously incarcerated women who have joined together to provide social support to women recently released from prison. She formerly worked at the D.C. Mayor's Office or Returning Citizens. And she's also she has a very touching story of her own. And we figured she'd be a great guest to have on to the show today to talk about mass incarceration. This has been a topic we've kind of alluded to before in previous episodes, so it's great to have her on. Of course, you know, we always ask everybody, how was their week? Tay, how was your week, boo?
My week was cool, as always. You know, I'm blessed. What did I do this week? I finished booking my trip to Greece. Me and my homie, we're going to Greece next month, so I'm excited about that.
All
yeah,
right.
man, she's studying for the bar right now, so it's going to be like a birthday / dumb at the bar type of trip. So I'm like, I'm here to celebrate too. Let's go. This week, though, it was cool. Like, you know, productive week. There's some great articles up on the blackjuice.com. I wrote a very controversial article about the Umar Johnson situation. Make sure you guys check that out. Right? Reactions. But overall, it was a great week. Can't complain.
That's what's up. And LaShonia, how was your week?
My week was great. I had a busy week. I'm working now at the Office of Attorney General doing restorative justice work. So I spent a lot of time this week chasing around some of the young people that I work with, trying to meet with them to talk to them about the pre-conferencing phase of that process.
Nice.
That's what's up. Katniss.
My week was good. I got a lot of sleep, which I needed.
Sleep is good.
Yeah, it was good.
And of course, I mean,
you know, the
y'all
man
even
on
gotta
the
ask.
streets.
I mean, y'all already know what I'm about to say. You know, my week was breezy. It was good. I'm the man in these streets. Jay DeCosta, always good. Like, no, week was great. Everything's going good at the 9 to 5. We've made a lot of great contacts for the Nitty Gritty. Obviously, things have been productive for the Nitty Gritty with all the changes. Our girls got this backdrop lit.
Yay.
You know, we got the intro video in there now. We got some more stuff coming aesthetically to the show. So, yeah, it's good. And some great guests lined up. We have a great one today. So, yeah, it's been a good week. Of course, you know, we always do our to hell with and our blessings too. I'll start with these to hell withs that we have here. First one, to hell with all these non-black companies buying up all these black and brown media outlets and still calling them black. If you haven't heard, they're a very popular site. VerySmartBrothers.com is the latest to sell their platform, as they sold for an undisclosed amount to Univision, which is no longer Hispanic owned but white owned. And Univision also bought the Root.com a few years back. And that's the BET, Viacom. And if they don't own the other half, Viacom got the other. So
It's ridiculous, man. Me especially, I was very saddened by the news of Very Smart Brothers because I felt like that was something that was for the culture, made by the culture, and to see them. I know sellout is such a harsh word. I won't go that far, but it's not about selling. I understand when you go in business to possibly sell and be acquired, but it's about who you sold to as well. But you know. What happens? You know, it's just a casualty of war. It happens.
yeah,
Just another one bites the dust.
I just think we need to possibly vet these institutions out. Maybe we can ask more questions and see what we can do to ensure that when we do sell, that it's still giving back to the culture. You know what I mean? Kind of like this whole Kyrie trying to leave LeBron kind of situation, but like just giving back to the culture. So if I sell. Maybe I'll sell to somebody who looks like me to kind of give them the platform to start at a position that I wasn't necessarily able to start at. So maybe we could do something like that.
That rarely happens, though.
It does, but it's an idea. It's a solution. So
That's true.
And then to hell with everyone that doubted Dr. Umar Johnson had a doctorate degree. Put some respect on the brother's name. It has been her.
Katrina, can you just just put some respect on his name. Can you say
Yeah,
Dr.
no,
Umar?
I can say, I can say Dr. Umar Johnson. You know, the credentials were proven. I'm a paper person. So to everybody that said that he possibly didn't have credentials or we were questioning him, I think we should just say he is Dr. Umar Johnson.
You should say sorry.
No, because I never say he didn't have the credentials. I said if. The big word was if, and it's been proven. So I have no argument for that. Still haven't. I did email him about presenting a proposal for the school that he wants to create. I didn't get a response, so still looking for that kind of paperwork as well. But
yeah. So respect to Dr. Umar Johnson. I don't think I ever doubted him. I don't think I ever cared, honestly. If you're a smart, articulate brother and you talking with some good sense, and then looking at where he worked, I didn't really care. But I'm not going to get into Dr. Umar Johnson today. You know what I'm saying? He needs to put some respect on some other names, but I'll just leave it at that. But anyways, blessings too. We always try to leave on a sweet note, right? Definitely wanted to shout out blessings to R. Kelly for being just as scandalous as these white folks out here. Shout out R. Kelly.
oh no.
Hey, I think a lot of people forget that only thing he's trying to do is be the next
Hugh Hefner.
Exactly, right? He got a whole bunch of young girls that look like they could be his great granddaughters. You know what I'm saying?
Well, my thing
We
is this
celebrate
time
him.
these girls are of age, so I don't know why people are tripping. This girl is 21 years old.
Hey,
she
you know
want
what I'm
to be
saying?
a cult following.
Hugh Hefner's girls, they have to sign a contract. They can't leave. They have the same demands. They can't be flirting with other women and all that. So I'm just saying, like, shout out R. Kelly for doing what these scandalous white folks been doing.
Nah.
I was being a little facetious, but yeah, shout out to him. And then shout out to my boy Usher. You know what I'm saying? Letting it burn out here in these streets. You know what I'm saying? Blessings too. But no, for real.
Well, if that's the case, we got to give a shout out and blessings to OJ because he the only.
Oh
brother I know
yeah,
with
blessings to
9 lives.
OJ. Blessings to OJ out. And dang, I don't want to say it right now because some people ain't watched Power yet, but I guess they alluded to what I was about to say. But yeah, blessings to the St. Patrick. Blessings to the St. Patrick family. Ghost getting out, you know what I'm saying? Shout out to that. That was hard right there, but my man, they saw the case and they got him out. So blessings to the St. Patrick family. Anyways, moving on to the show. As we mentioned before, we have LaShonia here, and so excited to have her. She was an inmate herself and spent 18 years behind bars. We realized, many people may not be familiar with her story, so we wanted to share a brief video before we hear from her. If we could roll that first video for LaShonia, please.
That's like doing 150 bench presses. I worked out a lot. One time twice I went out and I ran 12 miles. I haven't done that since I've been home. Probably never do it again in my life as long as I live. People think, oh, you need to sit down somewhere. You too little as it is. You need to stop running. But I tell everybody, running is my savior. Because if I didn't run, who knows what I would do. Those people who try to tell me to stop running should be thankful that I run. It's hard for me to believe when I look back that I was even that person, but yeah, that's what I was. I was one of the worst people you probably want to meet. Yeah. I was negative. I was miserable. I was stressed out. I was angry, violent, destructive. I was just a total mess. I was impoverished mentally, financially. I was a menace. And when I look back prior to 20 years ago, and I think about who I was growing up and who I was as a child, I know that who I became 20 years ago is not who I was meant to be. And even though I don't blame my environment and my circumstances, the people I chose to associate with, all of the choices I made shaped my character and caused me to become that horrible person. After, the lengthy period of incarceration and basically the evolution that I experienced, I feel like I became who I always was. It's unfortunate that, I couldn't just uproot myself and remove myself at the time because I didn't understand that was even possible. But after being uprooted and being presented with different opportunities and being taught different values through Islam and learning different principles and building my character, I became who I am.
Can you stop for a minute? Let me get my I want to cry. And every time I think about her past and what she went through, I cry.
Well, December 5th of 2009, right here it says Tay. And it says, how are you, my handsome son? I love you and I miss you so very much. So much.
After I got sentenced and I started calculating up the time in my head, the first thing that I thought about is how old my children would be when I got out.
My father's wife.
Wow. Definitely for those that haven't seen is the whole video available on YouTube? Right?
No,
Yeah.
it's on YouTube. It's on thewire.org.
It's on the wire. It's on the actual website. That's where I watched it. Yeah, definitely. We're gonna give y'all where to go. It's thewiredc.com, right? Or is it WireDC?
Yes, thewiredc.com.
Yeah, thewiredc.com. You guys should go there. Check out their website. .org. WireDC.org. Y'all should definitely go there. Check out the whole video. Very touching video. Well done video. But LaShonia, we're just happy to have you here. Just I guess you can start off and just kind of tell us a little bit about your story and kind of like what got you from obviously where you were for our listeners that don't know, and then why you're here doing the work you're doing now.
Okay, so the video time zone speaks a little bit about, I think, the area that I grew up in. So I'm from Ward DC. I was born and raised. I grew up in Ward 7 and 8, and basically I spent my most impressionable years in Southeast DC, and between the ages of 17 and 18 is when I really started getting into trouble with the criminal justice system. So by the time I was 19, I landed myself in prison for a violent crime where I stayed for 18 years. I was released 6 years ago, and since I've been released, I've been able to work in various capacities throughout the government. I worked at the Mayor's Office on Return to Citizen Affairs, and I also did work at the Corrections Information Council for a while, where I was able to go back into the prison and work on conditions of confinement, help with inspections, and bring the information back to the community to inform them about how people are being treated. And so currently I'm working with the Office of Attorney General, as I said earlier, doing restorative justice work. And it's interesting because now I'm working with young people. Previously, since, in my other work, I was working with adults. And so I'm part of a new team with 3 guys, and I'm the only female. And so we've been, all been receiving cases, and I've been receiving more cases out of anybody on my team, and they're all girl cases. And they're like some pretty serious offenses, and most of the girls that I'm working with have issues of serious trauma that they've experienced, that they are currently experiencing. I'm talking about young juveniles and young adults. And they have a team of people around them that are, professionals that work for their welfare, their probation officer, social worker, and things of that nature. But everybody's looking at the behavior, and nobody's looking at the trauma. So they're basically over-incarcerating them, putting GPSs on them, and just treating them like property. And so the behavior is not getting better. But yet they have to be held accountable as well. So that's why I do the work that I do, because I really feel like it's a full-out war on black women. I feel like it always has been, and I don't think it's changed. Millennial women are being incarcerated at higher rates than any women in American history. So even though we know the numbers, there's a lot of work being done, a lot of conversations people are having right now about women and why they are the fastest growing group of people that are becoming incarcerated. We're having a lot of conversations, but no work is really being done yet, on a national level to address it.
Wow. Now, obviously, you're doing great work. I guess I had one question. I'm sorry if I jumped ahead of one of y'all, but one of my questions is, understanding like where you were at, so you can understand where a lot of these millennial girls are. You said you were like 19 years old when you were incarcerated, and that's a good little while ago. What was the change for you mentally from where you were when you got incarcerated to? Obviously, I'm talking to you now, and you were talking earlier, you're very articulate. I've seen your work on your website. And I mean, obviously there's been some serious growth or something that's happened. What was that for you? Like, what was the catalyst for change for you personally?
Right. So first of all, that was 25 years ago. And I always like to explain that to people, because when you're dealing with young people today, how to think they say in the Bible, we'll get weaker and wiser. Like, this generation is a lot more thorough and a lot more aggressive than we were. So it's easy for people to look at them and judge them and be afraid of them, or not even want to support them, not even attempt to understand them. But first we have to realize that none of us are the same people today that we were when we was 18 or 19 years old. So there's potential always for every young person. So after I was removed from my environment and I was incarcerated, fortunately, the system worked for me, even though I don't recommend that, that's the way to address these issues. It worked for me, so I was able to rehabilitate myself and address my trauma. And my trauma was more so about the endemic violence in my family and the systemic violence in my community. Whereas most of the women that I was incarcerated with, their trauma was about sexual abuse and molestation and domestic violence, and then they turned to drugs, and then they ended up in prison. So we've been using prison to address all these social problems with women. And so once I became incarcerated, I was able to access, trauma programs and get the therapy that I needed, and do some things to develop myself academically. And then once I was released, I just basically applied everything that I was learning. I did a lot of reading. I studied my history. I did a lot of reflection on my personal life, and why I made the choices that I made, the culture, the environment that I came from, how my family raised me, all those things. And I just reflected a lot, and I converted to Islamism. I proclaimed my nationality. So studying more science helped me to basically develop my character and, get some principles and values that I didn't have prior to incarceration. So it was a number of things, and exercising. It wasn't just like I got locked up and because they removed me from my community, then all of a sudden things changed. I had to go through a transformation process.
That's interesting. Now, you speak a little bit of, obviously your experience being incarcerated. Can you speak a little bit about as far as what it's like being within the inside and being in those walls? Because I feel like that's not talked about enough. I know I have family members that's been inside, and you hear as far as like solitude and being in the hole and stuff like that, and in terms of not just inhumane conditions. Did you experience any of that? Like, I hear such substandard conditions in prison. I understand, like, at the end of the day, if a person did their crime, they got to do their time. But at the same time, they're still human in my eyes. So can you just speak a little bit as far as the conditions that you had to deal with in there? And I know it can be different from federal prison to state prison, male prison to female prison, but in terms of your personal experience, what about those conditions?
Right. That's a good question. So we don't have a prison system in D.C., so whenever people become incarcerated here, they go into the federal system. Mm-hmm. So when I was in the federal system, I was in Danbury, Connecticut, and I was in SFF Hazleton in Brewster Mills, West Virginia. So I was always really far away from home. So that was the first problem, is that it was difficult for me to get visits from my family.
It's in a whole other state.
Right, and see my children. Danbury was like a 8-9 hour trip one way. And so you talk about solitary confinement, and as you were speaking, I can remember being in the hole, being in the shoe, or solitary confinement, whatever term people want to use, and it being 3 people to a cell, and one person had to sleep on the floor, and then there's a toilet right above your head, and your food comes through the slot. So you eat in this room. This is basically you living in the bathroom with 2 other women. Wow. And then even after you complete your disciplinary sanction, you have to wait 2 weeks before you can get a bed, because there's no bed space on the compound for you to get out. So you're in the solitary confinement basically for no reason, because you've already dealt with the reason why you was in there, but there's just no bed for you on the compound, so you have to stay like an additional 2 weeks. And
So it's not because you did something wrong. It's just you just gotta wait your turn for better
bed.
accommodation. Wow.
Basically, yeah, to get out and to go back to general population because the bed space is limited. So you got to wait 2 weeks, like for somebody to go home or somebody to come in the shoe to swap with you.
Wow.
And just the overall conditions of serving times. Does
it take a mental toll?
Yeah,
on
like
you?
women, when you in the shoe, you don't get a shower every day. Like as a woman, I don't need to go into details and explain like how.
I understand.
Traumatic that can be to have to, be in the bathroom eating and sleeping with other women and then not be able to shower every day. Not having access to the proper things that you need to care for yourself as a woman. And that's just in solitary confinement. It's women that, are going through the same things even when they're not in solitary confinement, because if your family don't send you money to get the hygiene things that you need, then you can't get them. It's not like they give them to you.
Wow. So they don't just give you guys these sanitary products?
No, and it's not calling home. It's not free. Calls, and they're very expensive. Internet, emailing is not free. Basically, doing time is very expensive, and it's expensive on families because the people that are incarcerated don't have access. They don't have jobs.
Now, I know that it's expensive, I guess, even being an inmate, but in terms of, like, you guys do labor as well, right?
Right, so they have unicorn industries, but it's kind of phasing out now, to be honest. It used to be more popular previously, but they make everything from office equipment to military cables and radio mounts for military trucks.
And the women as well?
Female facilities, male facilities. They make all sorts of items for various agencies throughout the U.S.
Wow.
That's what they mean when they talk about the prison industrial complex. Even though it's costing the cities and the states a lot of money to incarcerate these individuals, pockets of people and different organizations and entities are making a lot of money.
And privatized as well.
Yes.
So it's
GO
basically
Group, CCA, all that.
it's like a new form of slavery.
Basically.
Yeah. Well, the prison system initially was the new form of slavery. Anybody who's ever watched the 13th document, they talk about that. And one of the things that they came up with the prison system for was to help with the production of cotton and all of those goods made out of the South after after the slaves were quote unquote freed. So what they did was whenever someone was incarcerated, they put them back in that. So it's no guess that when you look at the prison rates of how many people, I believe the stat in 2014 is African Americans constituted of 2.3 million or 34% of the total 6.8 million correctional population. There's a direct correlation to the imprisonment. And then when you look at movies like shows like the 13th, where they actually show the number of companies, and these are big companies that are in bed with the prison system as far as making their products work. A lot of the problem with a lot of American jobs too is that they're not paying these workers now; they're just imprisoning the workers. So a lot of our big American businesses are thriving through the prison population and the prison system. So, and I could go more into that, but I guess one of the questions I had for you, because something that you mentioned about the trauma of young girls, I guess is kind of like that catalyst for why so many of them, I guess, are violent at their early ages and get into the trouble they are. From what you've seen in these cases, what would you think is like the direct way to reform these young women before they get caught into the system? Because typically when you get caught into the system, and then not just girls, but this affects young men too. Like I've had family members. I have one in particular I love dearly. He's not even with us anymore, but he was in and out the prison system. And the system didn't do well to really reform him. The stories I heard, it's like you normally go in and come out worse in a lot of these facilities because the kind of people you're around, so it's not doing much to rehabilitate the mind totally. The only ones I've ever seen come out okay are the ones that normally find like Islam while in prison or whatever. And I think there's a spiritual connection to that. So, but with these but the broad base of these young people, how do we save them before they even have to go in? Or from your experience, what do you think that could be,
That's a great question, and I think it's a really loaded question, because I guess if we had the answers to that, we wouldn't have the epidemic that we have going on with so many young people becoming incarcerated at such high rates. But I will say that, first of all, we have to address the trauma, because I believe that any person growing up in the inner city community throughout America is suffering from trauma. And it's usually going to be, like I said, endemic violence and trauma inside the family, with the domestic violence and the subcultural values, the norms that we practice that are unhealthy for our children. Or it's a result of this systemic violence where the schools are not teaching our children what they should be taught. They're learning a curriculum that does not benefit them in a way that's not productive for them. And then they're basically being encouraged to go out into the world and be productive. And then you have things like K2 where, like, I mean, in my mind, I still haven't come to the realization of how is it possible that you could be selling a synthetic drug and operating a business and everybody know that you're doing it. It's common knowledge. Like, you're not even hiding it. Like,
Yeah.
I still
What
can't
you mean?
understand how I'm talking about, like, synthetic drugs being sold in the community. I still haven't been able to wrap my mind around how it's possible for a business owner to be able to operate a business and sell synthetic drugs, and it's not a secret that they're doing it in the community that I live in.
Right,
Like,
right.
everybody know where you get K2 from.
Really? Like
Yeah.
it's like
They
an
don't-
established.
They don't hide. I mean,
The local little corner stores typically sell it.
Scooby Doo's and all that stuff that be in
Yeah.
the windows.
I'm
on
so
display.
oblivious to
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, they.
But that's what's, and those are the things that's happening like that. And it's like we make it okay for our children to be exposed to things of that nature, or to be exposed to constant random gunshots, or to be exposed to inadequate education, and we normalize it like it's okay because they're black children. But then we look at their test scores and we say, well, we know how many prison beds we gonna need. So we basically set them up for failure with our school system, with our subcultural values that we practice as a community that normalize these things, and the things that's going on within the family where you have tons and tons of men, whatever the numbers are, going to prison, coming home with severe PTSD. They probably need to come up with another term besides PTSD, because that's probably not even sufficient to describe what these brothers is coming home with after they doing these sentences when they was victims of the war on drugs and all that stuff. They
Yeah.
coming home now. Most 95% of the people that's in prison, they coming home. So we're talking about a lot of men. They're coming back to vulnerable communities with vulnerable women who've been basically carrying their families and their communities for decades, and they're supposed to come back and reunite and be healthy.
Yeah.
It's explosive
Yeah.
because you have like I said, a vulnerable community with men coming from incarceration with severe PTSD, and then they're reunifying with no supports, with
Yeah.
no employment opportunity, no housing access, no health care access, no access to education.
And then having
Don't
that
even know
felony
what
record.
PTSD is really.
Yeah, and then having that felony record is like a whole nother sentence.
The
Like,
collateral consequences are endless.
right. Cause you had a question.
Yeah, I was gonna say, talking about how obviously these are mental health conditions, and I don't know. It seems like there's a stigma in our community where people don't want to go see treatment, don't want to see therapy. What suggestions or solutions do you think you have for the Black community? Do you think that we need to have more Black therapists? Would that help? Do you think our people would be more willing to speak with somebody who looks like them, or do you think it's just a matter of we have to make a decision to just change our environment completely?
I definitely think we need more Black therapists, more Black police officers, more Black teachers, all that good stuff. But I also think that we as a community, that's one of the subcultural values that I'm speaking of when I say we have to come to the realization as a community that it's best for us to acknowledge mental health concerns. And the men that are returning, they need to have access to the knowledge about PTSD and anxiety or depression or whatever other mental health problems that they may be suffering from. And they have to feel okay to normalize it and to express it and share it and own it so that they can deal with it. Because otherwise, you're basically out here like a walking time bomb, and you're going back into your family, into your community. What can you contribute if you're not mentally healthy?
That's interesting. Now, I had a question too. Obviously, the male population in prison is quite different than the female population in prison. So you had children before you went in. Now, was it you upon your release? Was it difficult as far as gaining your children back and reestablishing that relationship? And can you just speak a little bit as far as what that experience is as a woman? Because, I mean, I don't want to say it's easy for a man. Like, he could choose to be involved in his kid's life when he come home or not. But for a woman, it may be a little different. So can you just speak a little bit about that transition and being reacquainted with your children as well?
Yes, and you just reminded me too of another thing when you asked about the conditions in prison. When women are giving birth in prison or in labor in prison, they're shackled to a bed. And I know a couple of women, several good friends of mine, who actually gave birth to children while shackled to a bed.
What's the point of the shackles while you're giving labor?
Still don't get that. And they actually both had to fight for custody of their children when they came home, because in both cases, the paternal grandparents were raising the babies from birth because the mom was in prison. And when they came home, they were both in different states. They took the kids to other states, and they didn't want to get the kids back. And they had to fight for custody of their children. And yeah, that just came to mind when you spoke about what it's like to be a mother in prison and the conditions that, you know, women are incarcerated under. So for me, when I went to prison, my daughter was 3 and my son was 10 months. So, of course, being able to see them was important. I was able to see them like once a year because I was so far from home. But whenever you went into the visitor room, you always saw it full of women and children. You rarely saw men. Whereas on the other side, if you go to a male facility, you'll see mostly women and children. So it's just maybe a cultural thing, I don't know. But women tend to be more supportive of men when they're incarcerated, and men tend not to be as supportive of women when they're incarcerated. It's usually the grandparents and the children that's supporting the women.
Now, is there resources that allow, like, for that commute for the children to come and see their mom, like the state funded or government funded?
The Mayor's Office on Return to Citizen Affairs does facilitate a trip to Hazleton annually, like twice a year. And that's something that was started when I was there. Around the time when I started The Wire, we also started those trips. And they was able to continue it. So it's been a few years now.
Yeah.
About 4 years maybe.
And that's just local to the DMV though, right? There's no telling what's in other states and stuff.
Right.
That's interesting. Hey Jay, I did want to run that second video, and Ryan, if you could share some of those statistics when we come back.
Look, right now, while you're looking at this on your screen in your hand or on your computer, there's somebody just like you who's sitting in a prison cell. And they didn't do much more than you did, you know, some crazy weekend. You didn't get caught. They got caught. And they can never get uncaught. The United States of America is now the #1 incarcerator of human beings in the world, in the history of the world. We have about 5% of the world's population. We have 25% of the world's prisoners. We have more people locked up than China. China, who has 1 billion people, they got fewer prisoners than we do. You know, a lot of times people say, well, if you don't want to do the time, don't do the crime. Really? Have you ever committed a crime? You got people who are doing more drugs on college campuses, in yacht clubs, country clubs. We all know that's going on, but the SWAT team never shows up there. The SWAT team shows up in the housing projects where you got poorer people doing fewer drugs, and those people go to prison. But think about it. What if one of the times when you were breaking the law, when you had something illegal in your pocket, in your car, at your party, the police had kicked in those doors? Would you want to be known for the rest of your life based on what happened that night? That is what is happening to millions of people. If rich folks' kids get in trouble, they go to rehab. Poor folks' kids get in trouble, they go to prison. And you spend $100,000 per year per kid to lock a kid up, when you could have spent a fraction of that and turned them into a NASA scientist, turned them into a fashion icon. When people come home from prison, they're not given the opportunity to start over. You leave a physical prison and you go into a social prison where you can't get a job, you can't get a student loan, you can't rent an apartment. How are people supposed to start over? And what happens to neighborhoods when you take a disproportionate number of people out for minor offenses and you send them back home with no hope and no opportunity? There are no more excuses to have this horrible system continue when there is now finally bipartisan agreement that it is a tragedy to do this. Not only do you have President Obama and the Democrats, you now actually have people like Paul Ryan, Koch Industries, Newt Gingrich, all saying the same thing. We are locking up too many people, we're wasting too much money, we're wasting too much genius in America, and it's time to do something.
Wow. So, that video, a lot of great stats. I'm about to actually quote some stats. Even before I quote the stats, I was thinking about it. One of my good friends, Gretchen Jorge, she's from Cuba. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about just like the difference of even education. Mm-hmm. Like what they learn in university, mm-hmm. they're actually learning in high school. So when, LaShonia, when you talk about preparing people for real jobs or real opportunities, we don't do that here in America, because it's like, well, so when I was explaining to her how our college system works, she's like, so when you went to college, you have to relearn the stuff you learned in high school. And literally, during your core study, those first 2 years,
all them electives,
you're taking
20 racks a year.
Exactly. You're taking American history, you're taking political science. And I hated the fact that the teachers are trying to make me show up. Because I'm like, I could take this test in my sleep. And a lot of times I didn't show up to class. So a class I got an A for, they'll drop me a letter grade because of attendance. And then I get a B in it. So that's crazy. But that's a whole nother subject. But still, it's like, that's crazy that a lot of other countries are better preparing their young people for, life after high school. I mean, in like even China, Van Jones talked about that statistic about how many people they have, but how fewer inmates they have than America.
It's crazy.
Which is so much smaller. And then, like I said earlier before, African Americans are 2.3 million, which is 34% of the total 6.8 million correctional population. African Americans are incarcerated at more than 5 times the rate of whites. The imprisonment rate for African American women is twice that of white women. No surprise there. Nationwide, African American children represent 32% of children who are arrested, 42% of children who are detained, and 52% of children whose cares are judicially waived to the criminal court. And I mean, even when you think about that of the white women, that's interesting to me that black women are in prison at twice the rate of white women, but at the same time, you guys are the fastest growing population of business owners in America, and are also the highest population of women or of people, period, graduating from college or having additional degrees outside of high school. So it's interesting to me that obviously that the community of black women in America is doing something greatly right overall, but somehow they can still lock you up more than white women. The numbers don't add up, and I mean, it's. I think there's definitely an agenda as to how they're arresting people.
And it's not like black people or black women they commit more crimes than the other demographics. So I want to get your opinion on that too. Why do you feel as though it's this? Not even just women. You can say it's a war on juveniles. You got the prison pipeline, and that as well. So is it a war on? Obviously, we know we had the war on drugs, but is it an agenda? Isn't it an agenda from the system to, like, imprison these people and imprison us? Like, obviously, we know that it's a moneymaker at this point. Prison is not rehabilitation. Prison is capitalism at its finest, privatization, all of that. So, do you think it is an agenda that stemmed from top to bottom?
I'm definitely a conspiracy theorist, so
because some conspiracies is real.
Black and white. It's not that complicated for me when you look at, the new Jim Crow, the black codes, everything, the peonage, everything that we were speaking about previously, and just the 13th Amendment, period, in and of itself. Like, it's all by design. The system is working perfectly the way it was designed to work. And I can't speak for other cities, but I probably venture to say that it's probably the same story wherever you go in America right now, where there's gentrification taking place, and then there's pockets of poverty and crime that's being unaddressed, and people are being incarcerated at high rates and suffering from violence at high rates, and the schools are pathetic, and the health care is limited. It's probably the same way everywhere you go, where that city is thriving and Caucasian people are moving in, property values are going up, and our people are suffering.
Being displaced.
We're talking about D.C. right now, but again, I would venture to say that it's probably like that everywhere.
Yeah, especially urban areas and metropolitan cities. I mean, it's like that in New York. It's places in Cleveland that's like that. So
And even the video we just said talked about it, how it seems like the justice system is preying on the poor. So if a young black girl or boy who happens to be poor does a crime, they go to jail. But if somebody from an affluent area does a crime, they're going to rehab centers. And I think we need to change that narrative.
And make a note that when you say does a crime, and I'm not saying that fighting is ever okay, but everybody had a fight when they were in school for the most part. Now kids are getting arrested for that.
Yep.
yeah.
Like
What happened is a suspension.
12 years old,
Expulsion.
going to the police department in handcuffs and getting arrested and getting a criminal record.
That within itself is traumatic
That's the
and can
norm.
create
That is
PTSD. Like a 12-year-old, if you getting cuffs on at 12, once you're 18, it's nothing to you. You've been there, done that. So it's like commonplace. Like this ain't nothing new. And that I feel as though can fragment you mentally, and you maybe put youth in the mindset that this is their fate anyway. I've been doing this since 8 or 10 years old. Like this is nothing new. But what do you guys think is, if to put accountability on the community? We understand the system is set up for us to fail. If resources from the top is not coming in, they're not gonna send us a boat. Like you mentioned, the system is working effectively. So what can we do as a community to change the narrative? It's not going to change from the system. They're not going to give us more resources. They're not going to change things because it's lucrative for them. So what is the responsibility that parents have, that the community has, that coaches and leaders in the community? What can we do to save the youth?
That's powerful. Well, the first thing I think we can do as a community is to just have the courage to look at some of our unhealthy norms. You know, like when I was growing up, and that's one of the reasons why I really hope people read Through the Wire, because it's all
Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's all about my life prior to incarceration, and it's not about my transformation process or my reentry process. It's all about the mindset of a young person that's living a life of crime. And I came from a community where all those things were normal. Like I was raised that if somebody put their hands on you,
You fight back.
you fight back, and if you can't beat them, you pick up something. I was told in explicit details how to do that. And I wasn't allowed to make a different choice. So in one hand, it's like, yeah, I had a choice, but I kind of didn't.
Yeah.
Because I'm talking about even if I ran to my dad or older sibling, the story was still the same. You better get back out there and fight.
It was instilled in you.
Exactly.
Like,
So
you
those
fight
are
them
norms
or
that
else
we
fight me when you get
pass
home.
down to our young people who end up in the criminal justice system, serving a lot of time. And that's just one. I can go on and on about different norms in our community that we have to have, you know, the courage to address. We don't like to air our dirty laundry. Maybe we need to have some private conversations. You know, just have the conversations with the people in your inner circle, but we have to have it.
That's right.
I have a question. A lot of times with these TV shows, they try to normalize and make it really Hollywood what prison sentence looks like. So I wanted to know, if you're sending multiple people to a place that have mental health disorders, do you get a lot of fights there? What other pressures and or issues do people deal with when they're behind bars, as far as like gangs and fighting and killing? I mean, do people, I've seen in TV, I don't know if it's real, that people sometimes get upset and they kill one another.
I mean, prison to me, from the outside looking in, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Like, so my thing is, being in it is, yeah, like, is it fight or flight? It's like, damn, I gotta fight back, or they gonna think I'm a punk. Like, how is that rehab? It creates more violence.
Yeah, I'm laughing because it's so interesting, because this is like two different beasts that you're talking about. When you're talking about the female prison population and the male prison population, I always tell people, and it's a joke, but I always say women just want to make cake out of cookies and crochet.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? There's not rape. If anything, it's a correctional officer raping a woman, but there's not rape amongst the female prison population, or you don't have to be concerned about being stabbed. Whereas when I talk to the men in my life, who most of the men in my life, you know, are formerly incarcerated individuals, including my husband, and some of the horror stories he tell is just so traumatic, and it really sounds like a horror movie. Like, you could barely bear to listen to it. So you probably need to bring a male guest on the show.
Definitely.
To talk about the differences and what it's like, because it seems to me from what I hear that their very existence is predicated on how quickly they're killing of a man.
Wow.
To preserve their own life.
Yeah.
and you have, I know recently my niece, she's about 25. She called me because a friend of hers who's in her same demographic, her same age group, got killed in prison in Hazleton, West Virginia. So she called her auntie like, how could this happen? And I'm like, baby, I have no idea. Like, where I was not like this. But, you know, this is what I hear. This is this young man serving a lot of time, had been like 2 or 3 years in, maybe like 23, 24, got stabbed, got killed in Hazleton.
And that's commonplace.
Yes.
Wow.
But you should talk to a male who could share more with you about that perspective, because it's interesting to me that we expect them to get released and then successfully reintegrate into their family and their community.
Their mentality got to be different. Yeah, that's not realistic for us to believe that they're gonna come home and be of right mental and stuff like. Yeah, that's we definitely should have a male perspective on here for sure. But I also want to ask you, in terms of the criminalization of like even mental illness or drug usage, what do you think? Like, because there's people getting for petty crimes that's getting these football number type of sentences. Like, it's like, come on, man. Like the Khalif Browder we were just talking about off air, supposedly stole a book bag, couldn't make bail money, was on Rikers Island for 3 years. So what do you think the reason is that we're criminalizing such minor offenses? Like, it's getting outrageous at this point. Like, people was going to prison for, is this your third time shoplifting? Oh, okay, we go send you away for 5 years. Like, it's just not really realistic. Is it because of capitalism, and is it because it is such a lucrative industry?
Basically, yeah, and I stick to my same story that, you know, it's designed to work this way. Somebody got to fill those beds. They're building prisons right now as we speak in rural areas where poverty is rampant among white people. They need jobs. So they're blowing up mountains and building prisons. They're not going to stop building prisons. Somebody got to fill them.
Why gotta be us though?
Why
gotta be us is my thing.
I mean, so we criminalize things like poverty, mental health, substance abuse, and then we lock people up. We justify it because they committed a crime or they did something that was against the law, and then it's just a repetitive cycle.
Yeah.
But it's just sad to me because, I mean, we proclaim to be such a great nation, and the only way that we know how to deal with social problems is to over-incarcerate our people. It's deep.
Yeah.
Now, I know that you worked in, or you're currently working in the Attorney General office. So I got a question about legislation. So we know that the system's not made for us, but the system was never designed for African Americans because we were always looked at as property. And then somehow there was some ramifications made in like the 14th Amendment and all that kind of stuff to supposedly fix some of those situations, but that didn't really happen. We know that. Is there any kind of legislation being made to say, look, I understand they're going to lock people up or this is this, but to maybe just to address prejudiceness, right? Because I think sometimes we focus on racism, but we don't understand prejudiceness. And prejudiceness is what allows them to pull over the white kid faster. The black kid faster than the white kid, or to recommend mental services to the white kid before they even consider it for the black kid, right? Because it's not really a racism thing as much as it's a taught. I think it's Jay-Z's footnotes. I think it's maybe Kill OJ where the guy says, and I forgot which rapper it was. He says, like, you know, you have a slave raise, you know, our grandparents, right, and then or great grandparents, and then their great parents but then pass the mentalities down, and until now, literally slave culture has been passed down 5 generations down in America.
What does that mean though? What do you mean slave culture?
So inferiorness to whites, a lack of thinking you deserve better, right? A lack of not really loving yourself because everybody knows that the Willie Lynch syndrome of ours, what they put together. I mean, they actually had an actual like convention on how to split up the slaves. Yeah. They put the wilder ones in Jamaica and Haiti. It's a reason why, you know, to this day, people be like, Jamaican and Haitians are wild. Like, they ain't going. Like, those are the ones that wanted to escape all the time, so they, like, put them on an island so you could better control them. The more docile slaves, they went further up into America.
I wish I was in Jamaica. Like, I ain't the type.
Well, it's a reason. It's a reason why the islands, you know, got their independence, like, as an actual independent state over, the state of African Americans. So I guess I guess to bring it all back, is there any legislation being made to address, like prejudiceness? And so like, if the idea is that we can imprison this young person or even send them to help, is there anything that's saying we need to check off these boxes at least before we make the decision, incarcerate, and maybe send for rehabilitation instead?
I can't speak to if there's anybody working on any specific policy or legislation around that, but I do know, like in DC, we have quite a few diversion programs. And one of them is the program that I work with right now. We are restorative justice facilitators, and basically we bring together the young person that caused harm to someone and the person who was harmed with their supporters, and we have a discussion where they work it out. And if they can work it out and resolve it, then the prosecutor will dismiss their case against that young person so that they don't have to get a conviction on their record. We have some mental health diversion programs, we have drug court, which will be a substance abuse diversion program. But I also, like I said, it's a lot of conversation about women in the criminal justice system. And Senator Booker and Senator Warren just put forth some legislation. The bill is called the Dignity for Incarcerated Women's Act, where they speak about some of the things that we was talking about the conditions that can be addressed. Bill probably won't pass because it's like just too good to be true. They ask for a lot, all the way down to overnight visits, for women who have children. Yeah. It's not likely, especially under the current landscape that the BOP is functioning under. But yeah, there are some things happening, in DC, and I would venture to say in communities throughout the U.S. But as far as like a legislation, like I know there's a group of returning citizens that want to repeal the 13th Amendment.
It's long
like
overdue.
A dream to me.
You don't think it's realistic?
Maybe.
I feel like if we get enough grassroots,
it depends on who jump on board at this point. Maybe if a celebrity was to get behind it and say that we should look at repealing the 13th Amendment. But I do know that it's a group of returning citizens in D.C. that's doing having some discussions about that and whether or not that could happen. So that's basically the only thing I can think of as it relates to policy that will really get at the systemic and endemic racism in our country. Other than that, I don't know.
I got one more question for you. So you mentioned earlier, as far as like the lack of resources that we have, especially particularly the youth. Do you think that if you can go back to your 17, 18-year-old self, do you think that you or even a youth today, like it's a lack of, like as far as, are you just so much in the present that you can't see the future, or you're not thinking of the future? Like, do you feel like a lot of youth in these inner cities is just like not thinking of, dang, if I do this, it's going to lead to this? Or it's like, do you feel like they're so like in desperation or such like down on it, even mentally, that it's like I can't even see the forest for the trees?
Yeah, the lack of love and the sense of hopelessness is putting young people in a position where they don't see a way out. And I was there too. I had no clue that there was anything outside of Southeast DC. I thought that was the beginning and the end for me. I was never exposed to it. I didn't have access to it, so I understand where they are to that extent, but I think they're even worse off than I was because just first of all, the behavior that I'm seeing is a lot more aggressive than we were when we was growing up, but also like I felt like we had more unity in the community. We still had a little bit of that sense of duty that we owe to one another in terms of like neighbors looking out for neighbors and people still getting in each other's business a little bit. Whereas the generation before us, they was like all up in each other's business.
Right.
Neighbor was beating the neighbor's kids and stuff like that. We got away from that, but then crack hit the scene. And then
it's every man for themselves.
Right. So this generation is basically the product of the parents that was on crack or the people that was selling crack that went to prison.
That's real. That's real. I know we gotta wrap up here. LaShonia, it was so great having you. Thanks so
Yeah.
much for coming
Thank
out,
you.
spending time with us, for sure. You want to tell us where everybody can find your book? And
Yes.
definitely go ahead and plug that.
LaShoniaSpeaks.com. So it's LaShonia Speaks.com. And you can get the book. And I really wrote this for people that are working with young people, because there is hope.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of people out here doing a lot of great work. And I think if we can maybe take a look at their mindset, kind of what you was getting at with that last question, to try to understand where they are. So look at the brain development and think about how you were, at 17 or 18, and some of the crazy things you did without thinking about the consequences or how it was affecting the people around you. And then maybe we'll
I
do
think
a
that's
better
important.
job at addressing their needs and looking at the trauma and not the behavior, and just asking the question, what happened rather than what did you do.
Yeah.
So hopefully this book is going to help us get there.
Definitely. That's
Tay,
what's
can
up.
you tell them where they can find us at as well?
Yeah, definitely. So make sure you like our Facebook page at The Nitty Gritty Show. You can also follow us on Twitter at TBJ_Nitty Gritty. And also we're on Instagram at The Nitty Gritty Show.
All right. Well, this has been another great show. Of course, we always get down to the nitty gritty of things, and I was happy that we was able to have this conversation. Once again, thank you for coming on. And definitely, y'all know where to find us. Hit us up. Let's continue the conversation. We know we're big on that. This is definitely something that plagues many of us. Many of us have stories of our own or with close family members we could talk about. So hit us up on the nitty gritty. If you have a story like this that you would like to share, hit us up. We're always looking locally for guests to have onto the show to get down to the nitty gritty of the things that plague our community. Once again, this has been another Nitty Gritty show. I'm your boy, Jay DeCosta.
I'm your girl, Katniss.
I'm the one and only Tay Jordan.
And together we are
The Nitty
Gritty. We out.
Yes,
Be
sir.
blessed. Peace.